Welcome to the AI innovation space. We are your experts, and I'm Iyanu.
And I'm Todd.
We're here to offer our unique insights and hold conversations with top leading innovators in the world of AI and machine learning.
We dissect and discuss the often complex realm of AI in an accessible way and go deep in discussing the innovative technologies that impact our lives every day.
This podcast is sponsored by Ellumen, an IT contractor offering a creative and human-centric approach to medical imaging, cybersecurity solutions, training and support, and more. Ellumen's values of ingenuity and connection make us a leader in adopting innovative technologies for federal healthcare and beyond.
Visit Ellumen's website at www.ellumen.com for an overview of the services offered and to read our blog series on leveraging AI for your business. Thank you so much for listening, and let's begin.
My name is Iyanu, and I'm here with Todd, who is a co-host with me, and our guest is Dr. Dekai. He's a pioneer in machine learning, especially from a cognitive relationship standpoint, between different languages. Dekai is also among 17 scientists worldwide selected in 2011 by the Association for Computational Linguistics to be awarded the honor of founding ACL Fellow. He's a distinguished research scholar at UC Berkeley, International Computer Science Institute. And a lot more to say about Dekai, honestly. Dekai also has cross-disciplinary work relating to music, language, intelligence, and culture stems from liberal arts perspective, emphasizing creativity in both technical and humanistic dimensions. Thanks, Dekai, for joining us today. Did you have anything you wanted to share or something that I didn't touch on about yourself?
I'm happy to dive into it. Sort of gets me up in the mornings every day is the application of not only AI research, but all of my work toward the task of trying to get different cultures and different subcultures and so forth to relate to each other better. So whether it's through pioneering the kind of stuff that led to Google Translate, or whether it's in my work musically or in social impact, it's pretty much all directed at that particular problem that I think, ironically, AI has been amplifying in the sense of creating even more polarization in a lot of cases, a lot more schisms, a lot more divisiveness, and basically because social media AIs have been driving us toward, in many cases, the worst of our unconscious impulses that come from evolution in our cognitive biases. So connecting people, I think, is something that's near and dear to my mission with both AI and my other work.
That's amazing, Dekai. How do you see some of these areas specifically as it pertains to healthcare, right? We have some ethical. Here we have the HIPAA, but still, with regards to AI and ethical / biases as it pertains to the health space. Is there anything you could say about that? Is there are there areas that's still gray as it pertains to the healthcare space? What do you think about that?
Yeah, a lot of the issues that we work on in the AI ethics space are relevant in healthcare. So, one obvious case is bias in the data sets. So, when we're using data sets that we apply AI to for say developing vaccines or drugs, a lot of times if people don't pay attention to who's in the data set, then you end up with biased results, right? So trials might give you numbers on efficacy rates or other statistics of interest. But then if we don't control for the population and the demographics of the population, you can end up developing drugs or vaccines or what have you, treatments that work well for whichever population was in your biased sample. And so that's just one example of many where the types of issues we discuss in AI ethics applies in healthcare, med tech, and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were working on an RFP, very recently, and basically, that was something that, was of interest, and so one thing we thought of is there a way to literally prepare the data for AI, right, before applying AI methods on it, right? Like sample distribution, finding out like what that data really entails and making sure that it actually truly captures every single sphere, or every single sphere gets represented in that in that space, before we start even running our AI algorithms on it. What are your thoughts about that approach?
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the processes that tech companies are beginning to apply in debiasing data sets should be applicable in the medtech space. There should, be review across many different dimensions of potential bias. Whether these things have to do with genetics of a particular population, whether they have to do with regional considerations or socioeconomic considerations, the environments that they've grown up in, which can affect people's levels of sensitivity, right? If somebody's grown up in a polluted urban environment, that's probably going to change the statistics of people's allergy levels, and so there's just a lot of things that I think there should be processes in place to control for the bias in the data sample that's being used in the first place.
Thanks. Todd, did you have any?
Thank you. I completely agree, Dekai, about controlling for bias and data. That's definitely one area that's ripe for improvement in the space. One thing I'm curious about is how did you get into AI? How did this journey begin for you?
Yeah, I think this was probably a confluence of a lot of factors. So, well, to begin with, a lifelong musician. I literally don't remember not playing music. They tell me I was picking out melodies on the piano when I was 2. So obviously I don't remember that. And they also tell me I didn't start speaking until I was almost 3. So it's kind of like my first language in a way. And, as I was growing up, my very, Asian cultural heritage parents did your typical thing of, yes, you have to know music, but that should not be your career because, you can't make money off of it to support yourself.
Right.
And so you have to be, like an engineer or whatever. Right. And so, but fortunately for me, I also really loved making things, building things. And of course, when that came to discovering electronics at a very early age, I think I was 10, and fell in love with being able to make machines that would do stuff, cool stuff. And computers, technology was at that time just beginning to become more available. They were, very early microcomputer kind of things and, kits that you had to build yourself. But because I had been tearing apart old, electronics, radios, TVs or whatever to build amateur radio transmitters and stuff like that. It was kind of natural that, oh, look, there's these digital things, and wow, you can even program them to be more complicated, and I can make music synthesizers out of this stuff. And, so it just all kind of went, haywire from there. It was like leaping, from these interests that were kind of cross disciplinary, on artistic on the one, creative on the one side, and very engineering and science and math oriented on the other side. But I never really drew the distinction, right? It was kind of like forced. It was, it was weirdly forced upon me over time by our education system. For me, it was just like, oh, look, all of this creative stuff, all this opportunity to make things and to, combine things that hadn't been combined before, and just see, what that does. And so, I ended up dropping out of high school. Well, that's a long story, but basically because there was nothing left for me to take. Like, I'd taken all their most advanced placement courses, and the only thing left to take was driver's ed. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to stick around for more high school just to take driver's ed. I can do that on the side. I was lucky at that point, after moving all over the place, or being moved by my parents all over the place in the world, to be in San Diego. And UC San Diego at the time was still quite young. It's a really good university already, but it wasn't like most people outside of academia had not quite heard of it yet. And so I was able to talk with them and say, hey, look, I already scored, I don't think, an A+ in your computer class that I took while I was, a junior in high school. Do you think you could let me in? Because I'd really right. And the thing is, there was this, the UCSD has this interesting thing. It's kind of like Oxford and Cambridge model of undergraduate colleges within the university. So you don't just apply to the university, you apply to a specific college.
Yep.
And the colleges don't have anything to do with what major you're in. It's rather each college has its own vibe. I mean, you can major in anything and be in that college, but like they have different philosophies, and they have different graduation requirements. And, like, so one college might be, you can construct your own program, and another college might be, you have to have, in my case, the Revelle College that I chose, it was like, this was this liberal arts college with massive sort of Renaissance ideal requirements, right? So you spent, no matter what your major was, you spent your first 2 years doing this massive load of extremely tough humanities, philosophy, literature, social sciences, and foreign languages, and arts, and along with the biology, chemistry, physics, calculus, and all that stuff, right? And I was like just in heaven. I was like, oh, bring it on! This is great. All my interest. But to my dismay, all my computer science, computer engineering classmates at UCSD ran screaming to the other colleges where they could just like sort of get a vocational degree and get out without having to bother with all of that. So I ended up being the only computer engineering major of my entire class, my entire graduating year. But that really fed the interest in, like, that was a time at UCSD when the neural nets pioneering group was in the cognitive science group at UCSD. So we're talking Dave Rummelhart and McClellan, right? The guys who wrote the original PDP books, Jeff Hinton, and like, Terry Sanofsky, all these, early pioneers of neural networks were there. And the and computer music pioneers were there. So Dick Moore was there, and that's where I cut my teeth on that stuff. I was hacking on Lisp, and this is the early '80s, mind you. So by the time I crammed through that, and then I did a 5-year program in 4 years. Kind of
Wow.
nuts.
Wow.
And I was like, should I take the job offers I'm getting from IBM and NCR or whatever, or should I go on to grad school? And so I ended up obviously choosing to go to grad school. I went to Berkeley for my PhD for more of the same. And by that time, I was absolutely certain that there was no way that I wanted to do just, programming. I mean, I loved programming. I was really good at it. I was, I won't even bore you with what I was building, but the just becoming a software engineering seemed way too one-dimensional, right? With all of that humanities and arts and all that kind of stuff. It was like, no, I really want to get to the heart of what makes humans humans. So AI is the only direction from there you can really go. AI and cognitive science. So I ended up, at Berkeley. There were when I joined, there were only 2 AI professors. Bob Walensky ended up being my primary advisor. He pioneered story understanding, sort of narrative AI, and Latvizada was the other AI professor at the time, pioneered fuzzy logic. And then sometime along that time, so while I was a PhD student at Berkeley, at Stanford, and sort of across the bay, was another PhD student named Stuart Russell, who then, in my last year at Berkeley, he finished like a year before me, and he came and joined Berkeley's faculty. So it was beginning, and also the International Computer Science Institute was being founded during my first several years at Berkeley. So I joined that immediately upon its founding, and its founding director there was Jerry Feldman, who literally invented the word connectionist models of neural networks. And in fact, he's still the director of AI there, and I still have a joint appointment there and work with him, and as well as people like George Lakoff, who another one of my PhD mentors, who's a giant in cognitive linguistics, and how we use language to frame ideas. Especially metaphors, which underpin a huge percentage of the way we conceptualize abstract things. And so all of this, rich diversity of ideas at Berkeley and much more ended up, contributing to this stew of ideas across AI and language and cognition and machine learning, which was bubbling at that time. And my PhD thesis ended up being one of the first to really argue for probabilistic learning approaches to natural language disambiguation, natural language understanding. The first application of maximum entropy models in the field, and so that's kind of how I drifted on. I got in last year or two at Berkeley. So in the middle of that, it took off, traveled the world, landed in Germany. Did research at the Technical University in Munich for a year, and as I was a year away from graduating, got approached by the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, which was in the process of being founded. Wow. And they were recruiting 400 founding professors to help establish the university from basically like the top 20 research universities. Of course, they were hitting Berkeley really hard, and as an AI graduate from Berkeley, they were offering definitely, please come, and so I took that challenge, knowing that going back overseas again would be an incredible experience, which it absolutely has been. The University of Science and Technology here in Hong Kong, or HKUST, has shot up like a rocket to be one of the top research universities in the world in a few short years. Very similar to UCSD, interestingly enough. Just 25 years behind the clock, behind UCSD, and in between, actually, Berkeley and coming actually to Hong Kong while they were still physically constructing the campus. The University of Toronto out of the blue, invited me for a postdoc there. And so I squeezed that in between, which was wonderful because, again, Jeff Hinton was there. So I spent my year happily playing with more recursive neural nets, what we would call deep learning now, way back then in 1991, 92. Which was great because I'd already started playing with recursive neural nets at Berkeley and the International Computer Science Institute in 1989.
Wow. Dekai, when I think about your story, right, basically, I hear like some of the things that you've worked on, I see the whole repetitive social impact theme, subconsciously, right, in your story. And, it moves me to want to ask the question, with regards to social impact and music and language, what do you see being like the next thing? I know you're on the board of what Matt Gibson, I believe, is working on there. Where do you see like music, language, AI? Where do you see it? Where do you see it really going?
So that's a great question. For me, the fascination with music and language is that these are, on the one hand, really closely related, right, evolutionarily and neurobiologically. Music, singing, probably predated language. Language seems to have been something we evolved by scaffolding it on top of early singing abilities in our ancestors. And on the other hand, language and music are the thing that really separates us from other species, right? We don't run faster or swim better, or we don't fly. We're not stronger. We don't sing better. We're kind of overall pretty lame, except for our language and music.
Yes.
So that's our one giant evolutionary advantage, and so this, studying how we manage language and music is, I think, that gets to the crux of what it is to be human, right? It's not. So, a lot of times there's kind of this popular mythology that emotions set us apart, and that sort of thing. But like, if you look at my pet dog, the complete spectrum of emotions is there.
Yeah.
Right. You don't need human level intelligence to do that. Really, what sets us apart is our ability to use these language abilities that evolved probably on top of our music abilities, and then they co-evolved for years, to use that to enable our abstract thinking, our conceptual systems, to be able to think abstractly by talking to ourselves internally. So studying that really so much gets to the heart of the problem of what intelligence is, what human intelligence is. And so that's, I think, why it, from a scientific standpoint, why it's such an interesting lifelong pursuit.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And it's just kind of pivots me into this conversation around, voice and health, right? I'm not sure if it was on your stage where I was talking about, like, are there like, specific like music or, sounds that, play a huge role in the recovery or, restoration of an individual? For me personally, I've seen that, like, just in life in general, you're distressed, you're stressed out, or you turn on really nice music, and basically you start feeling a little different. If you're angry, maybe turn on some rap music, and it does the anger off or whatnot. But what do you see as the marriage, if you will, between the health space, AI, and as it pertains to voice. So I use music as an example, but it could be just some individual who comforts grandma who has no family member with her, encouraging her while she goes by her day in the rehabilitation center. What are your thoughts around that?
Absolutely. Like so much of human language, and bearing in mind that from a scientific and linguistic point of view, language is fundamentally a spoken phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the written forms are a very recent artifact. And so so much of language is really not the words even. If you were to take our conversation and remove all the words so that all you heard was the tone,
Mm-hmm.
the pitch and the intensity, um, the the amount of communication that would still be happening would be amazing, right? If you just listen to people and the difference between if somebody is going versus if somebody's going right, like
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge amount of information
Yeah.
in the voice, and of course once you add the words in, it's even more, and so there's when it comes to care, um, there is so much that we can look at with voice. There is just an enormous range of intimacy possible with a voice that text doesn't give you. That's why um, audio apps like this podcast or Clubhouse where we met
Mm-hmm.
um, are so powerful, because they create that space for much more intimate connections than text-based forms of communication. And so we actually, so I was part of an Aspen Institute workshop that created last year's Aspen Institute report on AI, and the theme of it was artificial intimacy, looking at how, in many different dimensions, this type of connection between participants, whether they're humans or a human and an AI, um, like how do those connections manifest themselves? What do they arise from? What uh, what can AIs do that would create that kind of connection? Um, and for humans, psychologically, that's really really important, right? So we were looking at cases of uh, elderly humans in retirement homes, or humans that had been subject to some sort of trauma, and looking at various kinds of AI that were being developed to be able to help care for people like this. And, uh, there are a lot of things that can be used as styles. Some of them are visual, some of them are tactile, but a lot of it is actually audio.
Yep. 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 Yeah. Because, like, there was this experience where or I just use this as a story, right, hypothetically, where you had this individual who consistently interacted with their family members, who was at that time in the rehabilitation center, and they talk very often, and talk every day, and things like that. And there was some type of loss of communication in the process, and over 2 weeks, they observed sort of a downtrend in the health of this specific individual, and stuff like that. And it starts getting me to think like the impact of like, communication on our health, and on the things that we do. So thanks for that contribution there.
Yeah, thank you, Dekai. So one kind of follow-up question I have for you regarding that is I work a lot with the medical record space for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and a lot of the information that we use is, medical images and radiologist reports. So do you think it'd be valuable for doctors to, record audio conversations that they have with their patients as part of the medical record, and, have AI play a role in helping to analyze such data? Or you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be useful. I mean, to me, and let me qualify this. Like, I'm not a medical doctor. That said, like there's many layers that you can mine that will assist, I think, with the care. So not just the stuff that we were talking about, but what you can read, what an AI can read from the voice signal of the patient, I think also has a lot. There's been work attempting to diagnose conditions just from the voice of the patient. And you guys probably more familiar with it than I am. But there's just a lot of signals that you can read from the way people talk about their physical condition as well as their mental condition. Doctors, I think, unconsciously have learned to pick that up, and don't necessarily, realize consciously that their scribbled notes don't quite capture that.
Right.
If anybody can read their scribbled notes.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yep. Wow, this is amazing. Like, this is really good stuff. We intend to have you back, Dekai. Wanted to really, keep it really short and sweet. One subject I think would like to continue to have a conversation with you on is the subject of AI and ethics as it pertains to health. And of course, I think it would be really nice, to deep dive into some of these voice applications in the health space, and hopefully probably write some papers, on this space. Would be really very interested in that as well. I don't know what the ethical aspects would be about, adding voice to that, and maybe a good way to wrap up the segment, right? What are some of the ethical concerns that, and Todd, you could also chime in, because I know you've been in this for quite some time, as well as it pertains to direct records and things like that. What are some of the ethical challenges that you would think we may have with regards to voice, and how do we see ourselves overcoming it as we wrap up the podcast here? So maybe Dekai could go first, and Todd could go after.
Sure. There are a lot of people, when they think about AI ethics, their thoughts go to privacy issues, data privacy issues immediately. And that's partly, I think, a function of the fact that there's been a lot of media coverage in the last couple of years about how data has been abused, and so there's a very high level of fear on that right now. And on the one hand, it's warranted, and on the other hand, there's a lot of healthcare issues where data is also the blood of developing really good improved techniques for healthcare, right? And so there is a lot that you can do, for example, to address controlling for demographic factors. If you don't anonymize data so much that you've lost track of what the demographics of the individuals are, right? That's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
You want to still be able to correlate your results against, well, was this a male population or a heavily female population? Was it a heavily, senior citizen population, or were they all kids? Were they, and all of that, and but then also the problem is that AI has gotten so incredibly good that if you have those demographic factors, it can become very difficult to anonymize the data. Right? Just from those cues alone, you can predict with 99% accuracy who that was.
Yeah.
And so, there's this trade-off, and it's a conversation that I think we need to have kind of more rationally, right? Because a lot of our conversations tend to be driven by fear.
True.
And so fear, this is again, evolutionary has left us with this. Fear is like one of the strongest emotions. It is the strongest emotion that we have, and so it's very easy for us to get driven to one extreme on any particular issue by the fear, and to overlook the fact that there's also really negative consequences if we go overboard there. So we need to have a really rational, balanced conversation about what's the trade-off between being able to save massive numbers of lives through improved healthcare versus what is the degree of anonymity that we need for data like this, which is great for training healthcare AIs, but might also potentially be revealing about individuals. How important is that privacy? Maybe for some of us, it's like, well, okay, fine, you can have the data. People can know my health conditions. It's fine, right? And other people absolutely don't want to have that.
True.
And that's going to probably also differ from one society to another society worldwide. But I think these are difficult conversations that need to be had, and that's part of why we have a lot of AI ethics conversations to sort of surface these questions, to tease out the conflicts that we have between multiple goals that we would like to have, and we often don't think about the fact that they're in reality they kind of have a conflict between them, and we have to decide whether we want to have our cake or whether we want to eat it.
Yeah, it's really funny. I was reading on the news today on CNBC, where we had the Silicon Valley leaders thinking AI would one day fund free cash handouts for experts and things like that. And a lot of critics were concerned that Altman, who was the one that was actually sharing this, his view about this could, that his view could actually cause more harm than good. But you're right. Then where's the trade-off, right? And so it's something that I think a lot more conversations need to be had with the right set of people in the room, to tease some of these things out. So, Todd,
I completely agree about what you said. About anonymizing the data and the trade-off between using that data for benefit and using it to figure out who the patient was, even though inadvertently from the algorithm. I think one of the other issues that I've ran across is who owns that medical data. Is it the patient? Is it the doctor? I feel like some conversation around that is always kind of necessary for when we're talking about these types of things. And then in addition to that, there's of course the HIPAA laws that say you can only disclose your records to so and so, and those always need to be followed. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm someone who's always looking for analogies with other things and the more analogies we can come up with, the more kind of, frames of reference we can use to think about these difficult questions. And one of the things pertinent to this particular topic is sort of like, is the idea that this is a bit like the digital version of donating my body to science.
Right.
I would, we have these concerns also, like in the drug repositioning space, right? When you have these clinical trials, stuff, it appears like, a bunch of people say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to donate, myself maybe, right, to see or to test the efficacy of a specific drug, right? And you start to wonder, like, does it capture everybody? Is everybody, included in it? Would it work differently for, this individual versus that other individual? Some of this also could be, concerns in this frame of thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Dekai, for joining us today. We really, really appreciate you being here. We would not stop contacting you, about these subjects. And I would love to have another conversation with you around AI and ethics, but wanted it to be a soft introduction to you, your work, and stuff like that, and some of the potential applications of voice in health, but our other conversations will kind of begin to go into like AI ethics and some of that this great stuff, and also some of the things that you're doing currently as research is concerned in the AI space. So, to conclude, you have some last minute thoughts or last minute words. And also, what's the best way for people to reach out to you and contact you if they had some questions or if they, wanted to collaborate or interact with you? So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that these questions, I'm of course fascinated by the AI research, but that's a whole nother conversation. Because there's so much that we need to do and that we're working on in terms of advancing AI from its current state, which is more or less artificial brute stupidity, to true artificial intelligence. But like, on the issues that we've been talking about, one thing I'd certainly love to welcome folks to join these weekly AI ethics deep dive conversations that we've been having on Clubhouse. There's every Wednesday at either 5 or 6 p.m. typically, depending on daylight savings time.
Yeah.
We pick a particular theme and then we unpack it. We really focus on going deep. And so instead of jumping around a lot of topics, we really see if we can get more to the meat of the matter, and those are a lot of fun. And so, but they also tackle really, really key problems that our societies in general, not only healthcare, but in general, face due to literally unprecedented disruptions brought by AI to every single sphere of our existence. And so I would love to have people join. They take place in the Artificial Intelligence Club on Clubhouse, and I'm just Dekai. My handle there is DEKAI. So please, find me and join folks like Ian in these wonderful conversations.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Dekai, for sharing, and I hope our audience follows up and listens into your conversations as well. So just to wrap up here, Iyanuoluwa, I don't know if you have any last words you want to say, but It was really a pleasure having a conversation with you today, Dekai, learning more about you and having this great conversation.
Yeah.
Very much a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
This has been the AI Innovation Space, sponsored by Ellumen. Thanks so much for listening.
Be sure to connect with us through LinkedIn and the Ellumen website to learn more about how AI and emerging technology can help you. Also be on the lookout for our next episode coming soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day.